Hi, my name is László Leber. Welcome to my channel Codeching. Today I will speak about the server-side rendering technique. Could you imagine please that you can use a React application in both server-side and client-side? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. And today I will show you how can you use Express to build a NodeJS server application to render a React application on the server side. Now imagine a web application which has a lot of static parts and has a few options to interact with it. For example, it renders an article, and the only interaction which the user could do is to search, for example, in the articles. Two benefits I can mention of or about SSR. One is the performance benefit of our customers, because the whole HTML is rendered on the server side and it will be sent to the client side when the whole HTML is ready. The other benefit is consistent SEO performance. From the SEO aspect, the static HTML is the best for the search engine robots. So, because everything is ready when the page is loaded, the robots can easily parse the whole web page. So, I think these two benefits are good enough to consider using server-side rendering when you build a web page like I mentioned before. So let's see how the architecture of this whole server-side rendering thing is built up. You can see on my picture that the request is arrived to the server. The first step is to get all the data which need to render the current page. The data is coming from an API endpoint from the backend. It can be, or it could be the same application with the application which is render the React application on server side, but in real life situations it will be different server. So the endpoint gets the data from the database, and if every data is ready to render our React application, then the NodeJS application will render our React application into an HTML variable. And if everything is ready, then the server sending ready to be rendered HTML response to the browser. In the browser renders the page. Now it's viewable, and it downloads the resources, for example the JavaScript and CSS and any other resources. And the browser executes the same React application, which is rendered on the server side as well. It's very important here that the state of the client application should be equal to the React application which is rendered on the server side, so they should be equal. And after that, after the browser executes the React application, the page is interactable. So you can interact with the page, and in every route change, this procedure will be executed, and normal XHR requests will be executed only if there is some other action on the current page, for example, like searching or any other little user action. The whole project is downloadable under my video, so after you download it, please unzip it to any place on your computer, and after that open it in VS Code and type npm install. It will install all the dependencies for the project. Here on my screen you can see that if I run the application, there is no XHR request sent to the backend. So the whole page with all the HTML, all the data is loaded from the server in the first loading, with the first request, the main request. Here you can see 3 cars and 3 employees. These lists are fetched from the API endpoints, but the fetch is executed on the server side. So the whole React application is rendered with the data on the server side, and no other XHR requests executed in the browser. Now I will explain that how the front end is built up. The front end is in the src folder. Now open the index.js file. Here you can see our wrapper component app container, which is only used on the client side. It's very important to not use a router inside the app component, because the app component will be rendered on the server side, and on the server side we will use static router because the browser is not available on the server side. So, and you know, in React you can't use a router inside another router, so this is the reason that we use browser router here and wrap our application inside it. So the other thing which is mentionable here is that you can't use the suspense on the server side. The server side rendering doesn't support suspense yet, so the app should not contain suspense too. Suspense is for the i18n package. It uses it, and you can see in this file that I use SSR hook. This hook, this is the point where the React application gets the i18n settings from the NodeJS application. It will be described later. In the bottom of the index.js file, I use the React DOM.hydrate function instead of render, because in the case of server-side rendering, you should use the hydrate instead of the render function. Now open the app.js. In the top of the component, you can see a use effect. In this use effect hook, I check that whether is the i18n initialized, and we have the SSR data. If we have the SSR data, then we set it to undefined. The component can get server-side data in 2 ways. First is via window.ssr data object. It's injected into the header in script tag, loaded in the browser. The second way is from props.data. This will be used during the server-side rendering, when the component will be rendered on the server side. In both cases, the server-side data will be used as initial state in our context. For this purpose, I made a higher order component with SSR. This high order component is used in our context.js here. The with SSR decides that what will be the initial state. If the props SSR data is presented, then it will be the initial state. Otherwise, if it finds the Windows SSR data, then it will be the initial state, and in other cases, the object which is defined in the context.js will be the initial state. Now, if you open the view/index.js, you can find the car main component here. This is the component which is used in our app component inside our provider. This component contains some roots, for example the /root, the /cars, and the /car/id root, and it decides that which component will be rendered, the car list or the car component. The car list component renders the car list basically, and I use the useAsync data fetch function in both component. I use it in the car list.js and in car.js too. This hook checks that if the component rendered on the server side, then it will set the isLoading flag to false because the data is already fetched on the server side in Node.js. This will happen in other cases also if the component renders on client side initially, because it will get the initial state too from the backend via the window.ssr data in script tag. In the use effect SSR hook, which you can see here, I made a custom hook. I don't use the use effect hook because the normal use effect hook cannot be used in the server side rendering. The content of the use effect hook will not fire, so my use effect SSR will check that is window object available currently, and if not, it will just run the content of the use effect hook in my effect. My effect is a custom function, and it will run the content of the use effect. So this will happen on the server side, because there my custom myEffect function will be fired instead of the normal use effect hook. If the code is running on client side for the data fetching, I used Axios. I have a service.js file and provider.js file, which provide a service layer for us to get the data from the server. You can find a detailed introduction about them in my previous tutorials on my webpage or here on my YouTube channel. The name of the video is How to Use Axios in a React Application. So you can find it there. Now let's see our main topic, that how can we render our React application on server side. We will build a little server application in Node.js and we will use Express. So we created the server application under server folder in our project structure. It just placed in the project structure of the React application. Basically, I created the React application with the Create React App tool. The basic idea is to build the React application with npm run build command. So the final client application is built into the build folder in the root folder with all files, with the index.html and all assets. Then take this index.html, render the React application and put the rendered HTML content into it, into the root div, into the div with root ID basically, and send the whole HTML with other data to the client. And how it's working, when you run the command npm run server, then it will execute the server/bootstrap.js. In this file, I require the required packages and register Babel. At the end of the file, I require the server.js, which contains the express server application. In the server.js, I write basic logic of the server application, which will render our React application server side. In this first line, I init the express application, then init I18n on server side. For example, set up the load path to load translation.json later, set up the I18n middleware to use it in the NodeJS Express application. In the next lines, I set up the port to 9000 and roots, and I finally start the whole application. Just for test, I set up, for example, cross-site scripting. I allow the cross-site scripting, and I set up some API endpoint here now to fetch cars and the employees, for example. They will return JSONs. Here I said that the static resources should just be served as they are in the build folder. Important part is here, the main roots, which will render the React application. As you can see, it will render the React application server side in case of 3 roots: /cars and /car/car ID. The server render is a function which will render React application and produce the final response HTML. So now let's open the renderer.js. Here you can see I import the React DOM server because we will use it to render the component into an HTML variable. We will use the static router, the helmet, the get all initial data, which is a custom function to fetch all the data which is needed to render our current route, and I18 next provider, because we will use it to send the initial language values and initial language state to the client side, to the component. First, I import the app React component from its original place from the src folder and the manifest from the build folder. I created an extract assets function which will extract JS assets from the build/asset manifest.json. I load all the required data for the current route into data variable. This data will be passed to the app component and will be processed by the with SSR hook in context.js, as I mentioned before. Here you can see the place where our rendered React application will be injected in the div with the ID root. I use the I18 next provider, which is used to push the requests I18n settings to the React application. After that, I set up the router, which is the static router here, I set up the location, which is the same as the request's base URL, and an empty object as context. I include the app component and push the data in props.data to it. You can see that how will the client handle this data in the client side's description. The services.js, I set up the configuration of the services. The configuration contains the routes and that which data should be fetched for which route. It will fetch all the data using fetch and promise.all function. Here you can see that the rendered component is placed inside the div with id route. The fetched data will be injected to the script tag in header in the index.html. It is the window SSR data variable, and after the page is loaded on the client side, it will be used for initial state with the with SSR hook in context.js. We send the initial 18n store initial language to i18n as basic setting to prevent the load of the languages on first page load. You can see here in the top left corner, this is the server side rendered React application. You can see there is no XHR requests. All the data with the rendered HTML is coming from the backend. And in the bottom right corner on the little screen, you can see that this React application is running without server-side rendering. You can see the XHR requests after init. So this is the difference between the two methods. Thank you very much for watching. That's all for now today. If you like my video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You will find many interesting contents on this channel in the future. With little modification, the same React application can be used on both server side and client side. And it's not an easy procedure to render a React application on server side, but if you know the right technique how to do it, it's not a hard task as well. Again, thank you very much for watching, and keep it up, guys. Bye.